basically the lowest of lows I'd ever hit in my life. And I attempted to take my life. And it was a tsunami of all kinds of, different things that washed what seemed like my life away. And I was given a second chance. As you can see, I'm still here. We're talking. So that's a beautiful thing. And I thank the universe and everyone up above for that. But with that second chance, I was fight or flight. It was like, what do I do here? So I decided I would fight for my life.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations, folks. It's Audley Stevenson, and I'm back with another edition of hands down the most audacious podcast the internet has to offer. You've got a lock to the Audacious Living Podcast, and I appreciate you for being here as we continue our ongoing goal of helping our listeners live their best audacious lives ever. As always, I encourage you to follow us on our social media channels. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook under the handle The Audacious Pod. And if you happen to be watching this particular episode on YouTube, then you know that bell down below. All you got to do is tap it, ding, 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 and you are immediately connected to all good things audacious related. Now, if you've been following along over the course of the last two episodes, you've noticed that I've been following and highlighting the BOLD framework, which is something that I use as part of my speaking work that I do, and it's used to help my audiences understand what being audacious is all about. It's simply a 4-letter acronym that spells BOLD, better than yesterday, outlast adversity, live your truth, and disrupt the norm. We touched on better than yesterday and outlast adversity on this episode. And on this episode, we're going to get into living your truth. Now, in the most simplest terms, living your truth means to live as your most authentic self, doing things daily that bring you happiness and joy, living as your true self as much as you possibly can. And what makes it so important is that by us living our true selves and showing that through our actions, we're putting the best parts of us on display for everyone to see. And the thing is, we all have an inner greatness that is blossoming, willing to blossom and shine, and it's inside of all of us. And instead of playing small or holding back, we want to shine it so it's benefit to others. And I think that's really key. We don't play small, we don't hold back, we shine and be as big as we possibly can. The other aspect of living your truth is coming to terms with all aspects of who we are, and this would include the messy parts. They are part of us and shouldn't be hidden at all, because they make up who we are. Now, my pal Jason Tyler McLean is today's guest on the Audacious Living Podcast, and he's here to share his story about how he's been living his own truth and being very open and vulnerable by his own mental health challenges, and how they've almost pushed him to taking his own life. Fortunately for him and all of us, his attempt failed, and he's since then taken advantage of the second chance that he's been given, and he's doing so by helping others, by openly speaking on the challenge that exists for those who are living with mental health illness. And he's doing that in hopes of creating an awareness as well as to help end stigmas for those with mental health challenges who deal with them on a daily basis. It's really a wonderful chat that I'm certain you'll all enjoy. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Jason Tyler McLean. Enjoy. Hey Jay, this is awesome for you to being with me here on the Audacious Living Podcast. Really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you, my friend.
Hey, you know what? First and foremost, thanks for inviting me and putting me out here. And it's great to see you face to face and chat with you. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
Good. Well, I very much find value in your work, and I think we talk about the topic of mental health and mental illness. It's an important one, and so I think dialoguing about it and even just addressing it and put it, what's that expression? The elephant in the room, right? Like put it out there that we all can, to see it firsthand and understand a bit more, but then also look at sort of some of the solutions and things we can do to get ourselves to a better place. All those things are important, and that's why I'd love the opportunity to have you here. And I wonder maybe as a starting point, because I know you spend a lot of time speaking to audiences. You've got your book, One Drop of Water, which you absolutely definitely do want to talk about. And you're an advocate, educator. Where did you start? Where did it all start for you, the work you've done?
Well, we'll go back to 2019. And 2019 for me was basically the lowest of lows I'd ever hit in my life. And I attempted to take my life, and it was a tsunami of all kinds of, different things that washed what seemed like my life away. And I was given a second chance. As you can see, I'm still here. We're talking, so that's a beautiful thing, and I thank the universe and everyone up above for that. But with that second chance, I was fight or flight. It was like, what do I do here? So I decided I would fight for my life. And in doing so, I found my purpose, which was not only to fight for my life, but to use my life as a catalyst or, a vehicle to start getting out there and sharing what I went through, the triumphs, the failures, and everything in between, and merging it into sort of a guide for other people, like mental health and self-help at the same time.
Got you.
Yeah.
Tell me, before you got to that point in 2019, what were, if you were to describe you, like, what were you like? Were you like, because some people, that guy, or that girl, they've got it together. They can't be struggling with mental health, or they can't have, but it affects everyone. So I'm just curious, where were you at prior to?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I was making really good money. I was in sales and I was running car dealerships. And I had, the nicest rides and all the fancy suits and clothes. And I was in restaurants every night and trips and the works. But none of that helped me when I went home and I was by myself. And, I've had a life of many ups and downs and went through some pretty big challenges as a kid. And, and we all have our traumas and our tragedies. But, I didn't deal with a lot of them. And so they followed me through my life, and they kind of snowball as you, as we don't deal with them, they get bigger and bigger.
Right.
And my ego was my biggest enemy for a lot of my life, and I stayed very focused on self-absorption and sort of the gratification in the moment versus what was the long view and all the things I was doing. And my ego kind of got so big that I didn't grow and I didn't learn anymore. And I thought I knew everything. And I became entitled and all these different things. And it ended up costing me a number of jobs in a row with the same career path I was in. And suddenly, I didn't have all this money and I didn't have all the.
So you said it costs you jobs, you said? That's what I heard you say?
You know what? I wasn't a good person anymore. And I had lost myself and I had poured so much into the existential and so much into material things and possessions. And I let that define me versus who I was. And in doing so, I had separated myself so much. Basically, all of a sudden I didn't have all these things and I had, that's what I poured myself into being. It became my identity. When all those things, I lost them, all of a sudden I had lost my identity, essentially, right? And then I was faced with just the very empty person who I was. So I plummeted rather quickly, really fast, in fact. And I just was losing traction in everything I did, and I lost belief in everything, including myself. And I've had depression throughout my life, and and then basically it just got to where I got so depressed. I was like buried alive in a hole that I dug for myself, essentially, and too proud to ask for help. And I was drinking a lot then, and that compounded the issues, obviously, and pushed me down faster and further. And I just started thinking about ending my life as I thought I was doing myself a favor, other people a favor. I got so delusional within my depression that I could justify these feelings that are insane. Like they really are when I look at them now and how far away I am from them. But at the same time, I can still feel them like that, because they were there. And I use those now as, I call them like my power plants, right? That's where I draw my power from, is those weakest moments have become my biggest strengths.
Gotcha. Yeah. It even as you sort of talk about the things as they're building up, it really is a slippery slope, Jay. Like it can happen relatively fast if you're not mindful of that you're in it, because sometimes you may not even know what you're in that moment until you're sliding and you're like, what's going on here, right? Like it happens quick.
Absolutely. Like that's why I use like the tsunami reference, right? Like comes out of nowhere and then and you're dealing with it, and if you're not set up. And that's one of the things I really touch on in my book, and a lot of the things I speak about and when I talk to people is that preparation, because it's going to affect every single person in life in some way or another. Our mental health is going to be challenged. Life isn't easy, and life can be really menacing at times, and that's just the nature of it, right? And we have to be prepared. And and one of the things I really touch on is that I think is really important for people to understand is mental health is very similar to physical health, right?
Okay.
So we often don't think of it that way, but when we break it down, when we are taking care of our physical health, we have usually some discipline involved in that. We have some routines, habits, and structure, consistency, all those things, right? And then as we stay in a good range of physical health, we don't get as sick, we feel better, all these different things. The exact same thing is for our mental health, and we can exercise our mind and our brain and keep the link between the body and the mind as well to stay healthy. And then that way, when we start to get into these situations that challenge us, we're in shape for it. We're mentally prepared, and that's part of mindset training and part of, learning to understand who we are, what makes us who we are, why we are, like asking all those important questions about ourselves. Most people don't have a relationship with themselves. Let's be honest here, that, we can offer the world of advice to all these other people, and then we look in the mirror and we're dumbfounded. We have nothing to say except you're an idiot, or like, why did you do this again, man? Like, and so if we take that time, daily, and this is something I express so much to people is important, is setting the day up right from the start with good routines, good thought routines, emotional behavior, training your mind, to do these incredible things. And, and it just take that same, approach to like physical health and mental health. They're the same sort of thing, right? So
Yes. Well, and I think you made you made several important points. One of the points you talk about, life is hard and life is challenging. So what that means clearly is that everyone is going to experience some form of mental health challenge at some point in time. So it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you if you're going through this. And I say that because I think for a long time the stigmas associated with mental health were a challenge for people to even admit they were going through stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's the criticism, the judgments, all these different things like that. And a lot of time the stigma comes from the people sometimes that are closest to us that really affects us. Right. And, our loved ones, like we start with our family, right. And we try to explain what we're going through it. And, then it's just, boys don't cry, get through it, work through it, be a man, all these different things, or if, you're a woman or whatever it is. And, and all these, whatever the advice a lot of times is like, don't actually acknowledge that there's something there. let's just, skirt, push it like under the rug and like move on, right?
Yes.
And then, you look in the workplace, I talk about it in my book as well. I went through an experience where I asked to get some help, and, they're like, why don't you try working harder? I'm like, yeah, I didn't think of that. You're right. Sorry. Or, I'm like, I'm desperate here. Like I'm,
Right.
how hard it is to ask for help,
Yeah.
and then the people that could help you don't even bother because they're just, and so that's another really big part of what I'm about, is trying to disable stigma by putting my face out there. And
I think though, we're starting to see society be more acceptance of mental health and mental health conversations, and encouraging people to talk more. And Bell does their annual let's talk thing that encourages. And I think
Sure.
what we want to be able to see is that that's just not one day, that it's encouraged all year round, because
Yeah.
our mental health is as fragile as it is fragile, and we have to be careful with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's always going to be trauma and tragedy in life, and sickness and different things. A lot of people don't take that in consideration, but imagine, someone you love, like my dad just passed away of cancer a few months ago, and the battle we had going through all that for, years and months and all that. Like, I mean, it put tremendous strain on my family's mental health, my sisters, myself, his wife, everyone involved. And, we had to constantly be willing to adapt and face that adversity, because you can't control these things in life. Things,
Right.
Unfortunate things happen, right? And we can only control what we can do in the actions we take.
Yes, that's right. And that always falls on us, right? They are our actions and stuff that we can do. So maybe talk a little bit about what the actions that you took, right? You talked about you got to that low point. Thankfully it didn't, your plans failed miserably, and
Yes.
we're happy for that. So what was the next step? Because did you think about, well, let me try again, let me come up with a better plan? Or
Well, you know what, I'll be honest, when I opened my eyes and I was alive, I was pretty angry, because again, failure was really the driving component of what put me down this path of suicidal ideation. And
right.
so I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, I failed at this too, so I was pretty upset. But after a little while, I got focused, and what I started to do is, during the beginning isolation periods of COVID, so I was all alone. I lived by myself, and everybody was terrified to talk to anybody, and I was sick a little bit. I had a cough, so they sent me home, and I had to isolate for 2 weeks.
Yes.
And I'm like, my biggest nightmare was being alone. And so all of a sudden, then the gym's closed. That's where I live in. If I'm at my house, it's the gym, my house, right? And so then I couldn't go to the gym. I couldn't do any of these things. And all of a sudden, all the sort of distractions I had were taken away. So I had to come up and formulate these strategies to find a way to live. And so what I did is I created daily battle plans, I called them.
Okay.
I went to war, and I picked different categories to battle against in my mind. So, I would look at the traumas from my childhood, from, different like sexual abuse and physical abuse I went through. And I would start writing all these things down, and I would break them into components and decompartmentalize them as much as possible, all the way down into where they're stripped down to just the facts. I took out the feelings and just looked at the facts of them, and then worked my way back to where I was today. And I could start to see the sort of the path that, how these things carried with me through my life. And then I could work backwards,
right,
and start to fix them. And so I started to do what I call the moral inventory. And I would write out all my, everything I liked about myself, everything I didn't like. And I would just deep dive into it and analyze it over and over again. And I started writing out all these papers everywhere, and it filled up my entire condo, and it was like all around. It was like the matrix. It was millions of paper, like not millions, but like hundreds at least of papers. And I started to connect them all by, this is associated with depression. This is with my anxiety. This is from, abandonment from my childhood. And all of a sudden I was just sitting there and looking at all of it. And I'm like, man, this is my universe. Like, this is the universe of my mind. These are all the different constellations of everything. And I'm looking at this map of everything. And then it just all kind of clicked with me. And I started putting it all together. And then those essentially were very rough drafts of what I wanted to write about and what I wanted to get out there. And, as writing, of course, was very cathartic for me, but because I was like developing my own therapeutic plan, essentially, right, through action therapy and cognitive behavior, everything. I was just doing it all while I was writing. And I came up with this model it's in my book. It's called the transformation triangle.
Okay.
So, a little triangle. And at the top was self-discipline. One of the other angles would be self-respect, and the other would be self-love or self-value. Right. And so I started writing down all the things I would do for the self-discipline to create better habits, better perspective, all that. Yes. And then that would create more self-respect for myself and for others. And with that respect, I'd start saying no to things that I normally wouldn't, because now I was respecting myself, right? So no, I'm not going to go have drinks with the boys just for something to do anymore, because it doesn't do anything for me. Or no, I'm not going to go, talk to the people that were from a bad part of my life just because I'm looking for company or whatever. And then that started to provide this value within myself and love for myself. But the most important component of that triangle to make it work was belief. And so without believing that anything you're doing or what you're attempting to do, if you don't believe it's going to work, it won't work. Like it's one or the other. Yes. And so that was the biggest thing, is learning how to believe in this thing. And so this system, I still use it today, and I use it for everything from, my daily stuff to like my long-term goals. And I write out the disciplines, the respect, and then the values of it, the love for it, and it's so effective. And so basically that was like the inauguration of how I started to do things. But then I started going like Navy SEAL crazy, like mind over matter or whatever training. Like I was like getting up at 4 a.m. and outrunning the sunsets. And then I'd like fast all day. And then, like just write and read. And I was reading as much as probably anyone trying to study a neurology degree. And I had like 15 books on the go and documentaries. And I wanted to bring it all in so I could put together this book and all these different ways to move forward. So that's how I got through it. And the people that have read the book and got back to me, they've been able to apply it and duplicate a lot of those same things, even though it's completely different circumstances and events in our lives. It's relatable and it resonates with them, and then they can, apply it into their daily life and create those battle plans.
I love the fact that you can, you create these battle plans and you can spread them out and help others, right? So and in your case, exactly, there's something that you need to do for yourself, but now you're able to help and impact a wide range of people, which is awesome. And I think any experience you go through, I believe any experience you go through, whether if you deem it bad, so be it. But it's a bad experience that you go through. When you come out on the other side, that if you haven't taken the lesson that you can share with others, then you've done yourself a disservice, right? So
agreed, 1,000,000%, man.
Yeah. I love the idea of doing that. It's interesting. I want to go back to the point how it can affect anybody. You're a big, strong guy. You work out. You're in great shape, but yet you struggle with mental health. I bet you when you go speak to audiences, they're surprised a little bit, right? Because they see you come in here and you're going, and you're going to say, "Wait a second, you look great. What are you talking about?"
Yeah. Well, and that was my biggest downfall most of my life. I've been this really good actor, right? I've been able to fool people for so many years that everything's fine, and then I'd go home and just be like terrified to be alone and my own thoughts. And I was destructive in relationships, with business, friendship, whatever, and all these things. And when I was going into my worst phase of myself there, like I still was doing my best to fool people, as I was still wearing my fancy clothes and solving the world's problems, sitting at a bar, talking to strangers and, all these things. As long as they'd listen to me and I could buy them drinks, then I was fine. Right. But on the flip side of things, once I, dealt with things and really started to come out of this and you know, I had my butterfly moment, right? And I got these wings, and I became vibrant, and was able to fly and do the things that I'm doing now.
Amazing.
For sure, I get people, you know, like they don't think I'm the speaker when I walk in the room, right? They're just like, oh, okay, you know,
Have a seat over there. Have a seat over there, sir.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and then you know, they'll look at if they you know, everyone's got a book on. There's 100 people, and they all have the book on the thing, and all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, you know. So it, you know, but that's the thing, man. It doesn't matter, right? Like you could be in the best shape and be all the things, whatever it looks like on the outside. I mean, let's look at Robin Williams, man. You know what? I did some of his personal security when he filmed the movie. I live in Winnipeg, and years ago he filmed a movie here. And when I met him, he had the saddest look I've ever seen in a human being's eyes, ever, except for when I got to that point when I was going to take my life. And I wrote about it in my book. And you know, Robin Williams, here's a guy that, you know, multi-millionaire, you know, one of the most successful actors, and one of my favorite of all time. And, you know, struggled with, you know, imposter syndrome and depression and so many other things, you know, and it, you know, ended up, you know, with a horrible result in 2014, I believe it was. And, you know, that's the thing about mental illness and mental health. These things don't discriminate. They don't care what you look like. They don't care what sexual preference. They don't care what gender. They don't care where you're from. If you're rich, you're poor, you're a kid, you're an adult. It does not matter. Nobody is immune to this, you know, and it's a worldwide true pandemic, you know, like there's someone taking their life every 30 seconds right now.
Wow.
That's over 1 million people a year. In Canada alone, 12 to 13 people a day, right? Like that's crazy. And you know, those numbers are getting worse because of coming out of the pandemic and all the isolation and there's so many things that presented, you know, like so many people's lives just got ripped apart in so many different ways.
Yes.
And we're not talking about that enough. Like everybody's talking about a recession or inflation. We're not talking about the real things. About what about the people? Like what about people's minds and hearts and lives and souls that were ripped apart and destroyed doing all these lockdowns and all these different things? And I'm not going to get political and Cheryl we're not going to start that. But again, I just look at it from the human part of it, right? Like let's be good humans and let's look at those effects it had on other humans and how can we help. And but yeah, it's you know, but like you said, to get back to the main point, like yeah, for sure, people, you know, they'll see me and you know, they it's hard for them to believe, but you know, and that's why I illustrate someone like Robin Williams, right? Because you know, guy had it all, right? And he ended up taking his life, sadly. So
yeah. And again, that just shows you the fragility of what we're talking about here and how important it is that we're mindful of what we're doing for ourselves and fortifying ourselves. You talked earlier, you made a point about being connected to who we are. Why don't you sort of expand on that a little bit more just so people understand what we're talking about?
Like connected to
ourselves, being connected to ourselves.
Like, well, that's the thing, you know, right now, if we look at, you know, social media, I call them weapons of mass distraction, right? And really what, like it can be really good. Like you and I, that's how we found each other is through social media. So it's a powerful agent for good when we use it that way.
Yes.
But, you know, since Instagram and all these different things have taken off, like there's a 300% spike in sadness and depression in teens because of all these pressures. So, it's really easy to allow things to distract us from ourselves. And that's how we get disconnected. For me, it was, well, I make all this money and I spend all this money and I have all these things. You know, I look at my life, like, you know, if this was a painting, you go, what a masterpiece. But in actuality, if you really looked at it, it wasn't, right? And it was a show. And so for me, I was so disconnected from myself because I didn't know who I was. I had no idea who I was. I didn't know the origins of me. I you know, I could sit there and blame all the bad things that happened to me in my life, which I did for a really long time.
Yes.
But until I was able to learn from them and understand them, and that's when I reconnected with myself, because you understand what makes you. You understand what broke you and what fixes you, right? And all these really important things. And so I find that, like, when I share my story with someone, just like I am with you right now, it connects us, right? So now you and I are connected and we're sharing things. someone else that's going to listen to this is going to hear something you say or I say, and they're going to connect to it through relatability of a circumstance in their life.
Yes.
And then, you know what, they're going to go and say, you know what, I was listening, hearing these guys talk, it was cool. And they're saying, you shouldn't be afraid to talk about, if you have depression. And then they may say something to their friend, right? And that's the
Right.
power of connectivity. And we're social animals, right? Like, I'm a big biology guy. I know some people are all against it in the world right now, and that's fine. But I look for nature for all the answers, man. And,
Yes.
we should be laughing, dancing, talking, connecting, right? This is how human beings are meant
Yes.
to be. And right now it's all artificial with, texting and I'm an old school guy, so of course I'm going to do this, but like TikTok and all these different things, they're great for some stuff, don't get me wrong, but what they do is they set up this artificial connection that isn't sufficient enough for people to be happy. We feed off each other, right? Like, we feed off tone, off linguistics, and all these different things with each other. And when we lead by example and we lead by, our body language and all these different things, people feel that, and we get drawn in and connected, right?
Yes.
And you smile, I smile, they smile, and that's how it goes, And if you got a big, bold, crazy laugh, you know what? People are going to laugh too, right? And that's connectivity. So the most important thing I can stress for people, because what mental health does, especially like depression or anxiety, is it disconnects you from the moment you're in right now, right?
Yes.
So depression is taking you backwards. You're going to go live in your past. And anxiety is going to take you into the future, but not allow you to
get excited about it,
to control it.
Right.
So they're simultaneously pulling you two different ways, like a puppet, and they disconnect you from the moment you're in. And this is all we really truly have. Yesterday's gone. Tomorrow's never going to happen.
Yes.
We have right now. And when we can stay focused and connected in this moment that we're in right now, man, that's where all the power is, right? And so, but you can't do that if you're not connected to yourself.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, and that's so. First of all, thank you for the illustration of that, because it really helps us to break it down, the significance, Jay, of why we've got to know who we are. And I've heard stories of people that will have these challenges and they just not have any idea who that person is looking at in the mirror. They're clueless, right? And it's almost starting from scratch, right?
Yeah. Well, I had become unrecognizable to myself. Looking in the mirror, and just disgusted with everything I saw, but I tolerated it because I had no relationship with myself, right? I just, for whatever reasons throughout my life, I guess I just never took the time to figure out who I was and love myself or get to know myself, right? And so I often looked for it externally in other people, and was codependent on, different people's friendships or whatever, attention, all these different things to get some gratification, but it doesn't make you feel whole. And the only thing that makes you feel whole is when you fill up the void inside with you.
Right.
Nobody else can do it for you, right? Like that's there's no secret here. And it takes some hard work and some soul searching, and you got to admit some stuff, and accountability can really suck when you're looking at yourself going, okay, these are some big things I need to change about myself. And a lot of times we don't want to, right? Because it's work, we say, or, we look at the very long term of that change versus the little tiny steps it takes to initiate it. Right. But that's the power of it.
Well,
looked at that waterfall principle, and that's what became a lot of my base of my philosophy. So I started doing one thing at a time, and I would tell people that it's just take that first one step. Take that. You can't do one push-up. Write one word. Like go for one walk. Go one day without a cigarette. Whatever it is, and you just got to think of it like this big, powerful waterfall started with only one drop of water at some time, and then you know what happens? It fell and cascaded. Then other water drops followed, and then ensued all these things start to happen, right? And it has that effect. And so that's a philosophy that I really talk about a lot in the book and to other people, and what was successful to me. When I decompartmentalize things so small that they become like one drop of water, we start that waterfall. And I often, when I'm in schools, especially with the kids, I get them to chant like incantations with me. And I always say to them, I said, I get them to say, I am one drop of water that will become a waterfall that will change the world. And that's how I ended with them. And they're all like, and I'm jacked up and they're jacked up, and they leave there with that feeling, right, of that power of the waterfall. But it all starts with the tiniest one little drop of water. So no matter how small and insignificant you think that first little step is, it's the most important one, right? That's what creates it. So
it's such a beautiful feeling when you know that you can overcome in such a profound way, right? And so that's why I love the waterfall analogy, because of what it represents and what it can do, and it really empowers people, right? It really shows what you're capable of. So I think it's a wonderful way of articulating that. And Jay, I think when we so first off, the mental health conversation, it always continues. It doesn't, and it should always continue, because it's something that's always out there. Yep. For people who maybe are a little fearful still, or not sure, what would we say to them to sort of get them out of that shell that they're struggling within?
Well, I'll go to some statistics to start.
Okay. So
in Canada, by the age of 40, 1 in 2 Canadians will experience mental illness in some form or another. And let's not exclude alcoholism and stuff like that, right? These are all components, right? So, everybody's going to be faced with this. And what I would say to anybody is this: you know what? You're not bad. You're not wrong. Like, this isn't your fault in a lot of ways. People like myself, sometimes you're born neurodivergent, different chemicals don't work the same way for some people. There's so many different biological factors that can create mental illness and mental health challenges. Yes. And then there's our environmental, which is an even bigger influence, in my opinion. We have so much going on in the world right now, and so much information that it's just clouding people's minds. And it's almost an atmosphere to create mental illness, right? Yes, like it's just too much. Our brains are so overworked right now with such insignificant things that shouldn't be part of our daily stuff, but we're bombarded constantly, especially when we're on social media and we're scrolling, watching the news. It's dangerous stuff, right? But here's the thing: we're human beings, and we have all kinds of factors coming at us that can challenge us in so many different ways. Now, look at it from this perspective. If your best friend or your lover or your dad or whatever, someone that meant the world to you, was suffering from depression or PTSD or bulimia or anything, right? We'll just put any one of those out there.
Sure.
You would do anything you could to support them and help them, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So what we got to learn to do is do that for ourselves. And that's the biggest flaw in the stigma, is that everybody is so focused on that other person that they forget about themselves. And there's a good time to be selfish. And that time is when we have to internalize what's going on with ourselves. Yeah. Because you want to help other people, I'll tell you what, and I'll tell you this because I'm living proof of it. You got to help yourself first. And it's okay for these things. Like, I mean, there's so much going on in the world that is so hard for everybody, and we're not built to take it all in. Like, we're not superhuman, you know. And so talk about it with the people you love, talk about it with that, and you can't be afraid anymore. Like there's nothing to be afraid of here. Like, with the word mental, there's a lot of negative connotations from before, right? We think mental hospital, mental ward, all these mental breakdown, all that stuff. And so I understand that some people, when we say the word term, the terms like mental health, automatically there's that negative dogma that comes with that, right? But it's time to let that go. Like it's time for everybody to stand up and be like, you know what, like I do have really depressed thoughts, or I do have this, but you know what, I can find my way, or I can help someone else. And I'll tell you from my experience, the biggest and most powerful tool has been helping other people to help myself.
Wow.
Right. And so that's how I found my purpose. And when people think of purpose, they always think like, I got to find my purpose in life. Right. But how about find your purpose in every moment and find your purpose in every day? Because it's that one drop of water effect, again, to build that waterfall. Find the purpose in the moment you're in, and it starts that first drop of water. And so when we can do that, we start to, again, lead by example. And again, I'll be out here and I'll talk to anybody and I'll tell them I've clinical manic depression, bipolar, I can go on and on, suicidal, anxiety. I got a list in my book of about 30 different acronyms I've been deemed with over the years.
Right.
Some wrong, some right, whatever. But you know what? Loud and proud, I am who I am. I've been through what I've been through. And you know what? Someone is going to benefit from hearing about it. And that's how we have to change our perspective on it.
Yeah.
We're too busy looking into people's eyes to try and understand them instead of looking out of their eyes to see how they see the world, right? And that's the biggest difference.
I love that. I really love that. Owning the journey, owning ourselves. Things like self-care come to mind, and it's not selfish, like we said earlier. I oftentimes think of the instructions you get on the plane, right? When they say the oxygen mask, when they drop down, right? And they tell mothers, put your mask on yourself first, because before you do your own child.
Yeah.
Right? And and that's gotta be tough for a mother to hear. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't take care of ourselves first, we can do nothing for no one else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Man, Jay, this is powerful, because the enlightenment continues, I believe, and it continues, and it does need to happen. So I really appreciate you stopping by like this and sharing your insights, and really kind of putting us a spotlight on a very important topic by your own personal story. And I think the fact that it's your own story, I think that's what helps people take it in even that much more. It's not necessarily a medical professional standing out there telling you shouldn't do this, or the study show. You're saying, look, this is what happened to me, and here's how I got here, but here's what I did to get out of it. Right.
That's right.
So very awesome.
Thank you.
For our listeners who want to learn about more about you, or even pick up a copy of One Drop of Water, where can we send them?
Sure. So One Drop of Water is available worldwide on Amazon. You can pick it up there in paperback or an ebook for Kindle. And that you can hit me up on Instagram at Jason Tyler McLean. I'm always posting stuff on there, different, sharing different things, and doing my best to inspire people and help people on there as well. If by chance anyone's got video, I'll show you. This is the book here.
Yeah, it's a great cover.
Water.
It's a great cover.
There it is. Thanks. Yeah, thanks. But yeah, it's I'm working on a second book that I'm hoping it's kind of a segue between this and my next big book, which is going to be called The Monarch Butterfly Effect, which is a chapter in this book here. Actually, there 17 of these chapters will become their own book.
Oh wow.
And that's kind of how I wrote it, is I wanted to set up all the different sort of categories for each book I wanted to write.
Yes.
But I'm working on one it's called My Mental Health Handbook, and it's going to be a 21-day self-help mental health guide to transform and change, over a quick period of time to just get yourself sorted out and move in the right direction.
That's so amazing. It's so amazing. I love that concept that each chapter is his own book, and it's powerful. Also, I think it's always really powerful, Jay, just the manner in which you live your life, and you show the fun side of it. And I had an opportunity to check you out on social media a bit too. Yeah. And again, I think it's so important that we are able to encapsulate that. But I would imagine for you, when you think of where you've come from and where you are now, it must seem like night and day.
It sure does. Yeah. But at the same time, I can close my eyes and be back there, you know what I mean? And feel it when I need to sometimes. But I take it as in the most humble steps that I can, like I never think that I'm better than I was. I'm just seeing things better, and I'm understanding things better, and it allows me to do better things. Right. So, but for sure, I look where I was, especially on, November 19th, 2019 was the day, and where I am today, and I couldn't be farther from it. So it's a beautiful success story that I'm incredibly proud of, and
as you should be.
And you know what? And I use it to inspire others so they can do the same.
What I also find really interesting is the timing of that, because you look at the pandemic that happened in 2020, and that was a period where people's mental health were certainly challenged, a large number. And so to know, you went through a challenge just before that, and on that path of recovery, you're now able to assist others, because I think that your timing, if you set it up, the timing could have been better in that regard to be able to help others, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was just, again, those environmental factors that we can't control. And that solitude and that isolation that I was forced to be in is what made me write the book and made me change everything about myself. Excuse me. And so, like you said, and then it just was the perfect timing to come out and to launch this to the world and offer everything I could, because people were still going through it or just getting into it again. Right.
Yes. Very cool. Very cool. Again, Jay, thank you so much for the time. This is awesome chatting with you, and all the best, my friend. Well, congratulations, first and foremost, because I think it's important to acknowledge your work and what you're doing and what you are doing, and all the best.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And right back at you, my friend.
Take care.
Awesome, man. Thanks.
Back we are here on the podcast, and first and foremost, I got to send out my appreciation and thanks to my buddy Jason for being here and sharing his very, very powerful story. There's no question that he was pushed to the brink, but to know that he's able to turn his life around in such a profound way and make an impact on others is phenomenal. So again, thank you, Jason, for being here. His book, of course, is entitled One Drop of Water. I encourage all of the listeners to go out and check out and grab a copy for yourself. When I think back to my conversation with Jason, he really left us with a lot of great points, and I appreciated so much of what he had to say. But if there's just one thing that I would take from my chat with him, it would be this. We live in a world where much uncertainty and doubt exist, and little to advance notice is available about what's coming around the corner. At one time, we were able to plan or predict every step of our journey to its success, but that no longer is the case. In today's environment, change is the only constant, but the unknown shouldn't hold us back from taking that first step. Courage isn't about knowing the path. It's just about taking the first step. All accomplishments start with a decision to begin. And when we make that first step, what it does, it generates a momentum. And it's a power force that, if followed and sustained, can help all of us reach our goals. Life rewards those who are willing to be involved in it and take chances and take risks. And as long as you hold back, those rewards won't be ready available to you. You should not wait until the perfect situation, because no situation will ever be perfect to make that first move. If you wanted to make that first step, then do it today. Don't hesitate. Be audacious and act. Hey, listen, if you haven't registered for email notifications of the podcast, please know that you can do so simply by heading over to bestaudaciouslife.com, and all you've got to do is enter in your email address, and you'll be alerted every time there's brand new content that comes out. To our listeners, as always, I thank you for your amazing support, and all those lovers of Audacious, I thank you so much. We've sadly come to an end of another episode, and as always, I want to extend my appreciation and my thanks. If you are a regular listener, thank you. If you're checking us out for the first time, thank you as well. If you're so inclined, please head over to your favorite podcast listening platform. Leave a comment. A 5-star rating would be absolutely incredible. But these are things that help this podcast grow, and so I really would appreciate your support in that regard. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.